My first NDE occurred when I was 9 years old. I have no recollection of what triggered the NDE, but I think it was something my father did to me because my body was in the garden. Our property was encircled by thick, tall hedges, making it impossible for the neighbors to see what was going on. What I do recall well is floating about the backyard, happier than I had ever been. I was having fun in my out-of-body experience without thinking I was dead or may die. I don't recall a tunnel, but I do recall a brilliant light above me. I suddenly felt happiness and realized that this light was God. God communicated with me telepathically. Yet it was evident that it was not my own ideas. I was informed that I was there to accomplish something for God and that I should continue with what I was meant to do. I was filled with excitement and loyalty at the prospect of being able to accomplish something that would satisfy God, whatever that might be. I didn't appear to mind what was expected of me since I was so anxious to please God. I hastily said yes, not comprehending that I had an option between dying and prolonging my life. However, I don't think it would have made a difference to me because I was all in. Then God told me I needed to get baptized. I needed to go grab my father and inform him I wanted to be baptized, as well as invite him to witness my baptism. I was back in my body once the illumination faded. I was unhappy that I no longer had that great and liberating sensation. I was relieved to come back to work for God. I thought my purpose was confined to becoming baptized at the time, but I guess it was due to my age and lack of knowledge. I should add that my family and I used to go to church together until my parents were thrown out for reasons unbeknownst to me. I like religion and continued to go even after my folks moved away. I walked inside and summoned my father, who was in the basement. I stated that I needed to speak with him. He requested me to accompany him to the backyard and wait for him. He emerged from the house and sat on the back stairs. I told him I wanted to get baptized and that I wanted him to be there to witness it. He inquired as to why I desired to be baptized. I informed him that I desired to serve God. He then inquired as to whether the church had set me up for this. No, I said, I've just seen God. And God had just informed me that he wanted me to be baptized. My father seemed terrified. He assured me that he would speak with the pastor and request permission to be present during my baptism. He warned me not to tell my mother that God had talked to me because she would be alarmed. I'm not sure why I was instructed to get baptized because I feel it's a religious ceremony that has nothing to do with what happens after I die. I believe it was an attempt to convince my father that he had murdered me and that there is a God. It may have been an attempt to encourage him to think about what he was doing, but it didn't halt the violence. Nonetheless, at the age of 9, I was the youngest person ever baptized in that church. My parents were present, despite the fact that they never returned to the church. The second encounter occurred when I was a small child. Although I don't recall my age, it might have happened before my NDE at the age of 9. I recall feeling quite ill. I was lying on the living room couch. I quickly began to feel considerably worse and began to have odd hallucinations of numbers. This event was so odd that I'm at a loss for words. Equations flashed in front of me, and as they did, I immediately grasped mathematics that were much above my capabilities. It seemed as if I intuitively knew all of this stuff, which was especially strange given how awful I was at math. Even though I was too young to understand them at the time, I knew what the equations were. This terrified me since I knew it wasn't correct, and I didn't want to remember all of the arithmetic. I decided to go grab my mother and inform her that I was really ill, and that something was seriously wrong with me. Mom was in the kitchen, seated on a chair, staring into space, as if deep in thought. I tried to converse with her, but she didn't seem to hear or notice me. I eventually gave up trying to catch her attention and returned to the couch, where I was surprised to discover myself already laying there. At the time, I put it down to being so unwell that I was seeing things rather than realizing I had been out of my body. As the years went, I grew increasingly enraged with God. I couldn't understand why a loving God would allow me to be mistreated when I was a teenager. This made no sense to me because I tried so hard to be decent. When I was 16, my father picked me up from church and confronted me over something I had said to him. He struck me in the gut so hard that it knocked the wind out of me. As I battled to gather my breath, he informed me that he despised me and had considered murdering me but was afraid of being apprehended by the authorities. After that, I fell into a severe despair. I hoped he had murdered me because it would have been preferable than enduring my horrible existence. I reasoned that if my own father despised me so much that he wished I were dead, I must be truly unlovable and unfit. Even if it were true that killing myself would send me to hell, I couldn't fathom hell being much worse than what I was experiencing. I was willing to take that chance. I then attempted many suicide attempts, none of which were successful. I enjoyed reading. It was a fantastic escape from my world into another, though imaginary one. My mother enjoyed reading as well. When she completed a book, she added it to a stack of volumes she kept against the wall of her bedroom. When she was finished, I read every book she had read. I chose Shirley MacLaine's book out on a limb from her stack one day. If you're not familiar with her work, it's about reincarnation and aliens. It was the first time I had pondered reincarnation. and it led me to wonder that perhaps the reason my life had been so terrible was because I had been a nasty person in my previous life, and this was my karma. It also made me believe that I could strike a deal with God. I prayed in a very ardent and emotional manner. If reincarnation was genuine, I promised God I'd strike a bargain with him. I assured him I would do everything he requested if it were in another life, with another family, and where I was cherished rather than mistreated. I had essentially been hoping for death. Then I passed away. I felt a sharp, excruciating ache in the back of my head. I don't mean I had a regular headache or a migraine. This, though, was the mother of all headaches. It was so agonizing that I was certain that God was fulfilling my request, but that I would die as a result of my brain bursting. It felt like there was a lot of pressure in my mind and it was about to erupt. Later, I talked to my neurologist about it, and he stated it sounded like I had a ruptured aneurysm in my brain. If this is what happened, it's not so far-fetched that I may have had one at the age of 16, given that head trauma is one of the things that can trigger them. Also, because I was so irritated at the time, my blood pressure had most likely increased. Another strange thing was that I felt these energy zones ignite in a straight line up my body. I could feel them activate one at a time, starting in my pelvis and working my way up to the top of my head. I had no concept what chakras were till I learned about them later. My throat was exceptionally charged with electricity. The ache had vanished by the time I felt the energy point activate near the top of my head. I was drifting higher, out of my body. I was now in a completely dark nothingness. I was perplexed since my faith taught me that people either go to paradise or hell. I never imagined death as a state in which you retained awareness but remained in emptiness. I wondered whether my eyes just needed some time to acclimatize to the absence of light, so I stared into the darkness to see if anything was there. Surely there's something here, I reasoned. On a grid, I noticed numerous geometrical objects floating towards me. I've subsequently heard that other people discovered through their NDE that who or what you see is depending on what you expect, which makes you feel better. So I guess I felt a blank until I realized there should be something. In that scenario, because the something isn't a particularly definite notion, I received unspecific forms. Then I wondered, where is God? I had assumed that when I died, I would meet God. My mind expanded to cover the entire universe as a result of this thinking. I was flooded with the most incredible, pure love, and I knew it was God. It was an emotion and a love beyond anything you've ever felt, and I can't express it in any manner that does it credit. It was absolute heaven. I was everywhere and a part of everything at the same time. I was loaded with all available information and knew everything there was to know. I was adored. I realized we are all related to everything, including trees, rocks, and animals. I was then transported to what appeared to be a light-filled cave. I crouched behind a wall in this cave and peered over the corner at what appeared to be the usual gray alien with enormous black eyes. I'm not sure if she was a true extraterrestrial or if she pretended to be an alien because that was my anticipation after reading Shirley MacLaine's novel. I was hiding not because I was terrified of the extraterrestrial, but because I felt I shouldn't be there. I was meant to be living my earthly existence. The extraterrestrial asked me telepathically if I was going to come out of hiding. I went out to talk to her since she knew I was there. I'm not sure whether the extraterrestrial has a gender, so I'm simply labeling it a her. I was taken aback by how stunning she looked. Her body was foreign, yet it was formed of light. Her body was a moving light of a hue that didn't exist on Earth, so it appeared like an aurora borealis. I was aware that humans might be horrifyingly afraid and aggressive. I didn't get the impression that the extraterrestrial was terrified of me, but I assured her not to worry and that I wouldn't hurt her since I was a good person. She was attempting to draw my attention to what appeared to be a flat-screen television on the cave's wall. This was before the invention of flat-screen televisions. It was playing images from my life, but I couldn't take my gaze away from her since she was so gorgeous, and it's not every day that you get to meet an extraterrestrial. Why do you constantly trying to get me to look at that? I said, that doesn't appeal to me. My life is already known to me. I'm intrigued by you. You are stunning. I then asked if I may look her in the eyes, which she agreed to. But there was nothing but darkness. On the TV screen was a clip of me and my pals preparing for the high school musical in which I played the lead. I recognized that the musical would be canceled if I died. In the show, I had roughly 7 solos or duets and no understudy. Theater and literature were the 2 things in life that brought me joy, and I couldn't take that joy away from the theater students at school. I began hurtling backward at a fast rate of speed to make a hard impact into my body as soon as I understood I didn't want to injure the kids at school by dying. I dashed to the bathroom and puked. When I returned, I had a clear sense of what I needed to do next. I needed to love my father unreservedly in the same manner that I had been loved unconditionally in my ND. I knew my father was cruel and aggressive because he felt unwanted. And I also understood that when individuals feel hated, the emptiness inside them often prompts them to take their misery out on others. Our world's issues are created by a lack of love for one another, and they may be rectified by loving one another unconditionally and compassionately rather than criticizing them. Despite the fact that I was a victim, I despised my father. I had realized that there is good in everyone. We simply have to search for it. I eventually came up with something wonderful about my father after 2 weeks of thinking about it. My father adored plants. He was cruel to others, yet he took great care in cultivating our yard. In fact, we had the most beautiful backyard in the area. We had flower beds, rose bushes, blooming trees, fruit trees, hedges, and other landscaping features. My father truly cared about something. Every time he shouted at me, I disregarded what he was saying and thought to myself, "You are a really amazing gardener," while projecting love to him. By projecting love, I mean that I saw love as a light or energy that grew from my body when I had loving thoughts, and that this love would fill him, even though I wasn't saying anything out loud. This halted him in his tracks. I did, however, tell him from time to time that he was an excellent gardener, and that we had the greatest yard in the area to remind him of the caring part of himself. He stopped being aggressive and told me one day that he believed I was the only one on the planet who loved him. I'd never told him I loved him, but my efforts to love him were having an effect on him. My sister despises our father and shuddered when I told her about my NDE and what I had learned about the need of unconditional love for him. She informed me she suspected I had Stockholm Syndrome. I understand that this is a difficult concept for many people to grasp. It's difficult to love someone who has been unkind to you, but thinking of it as discovering the good in them might help. That is where you begin. You begin by admiring people's kindness. It doesn't mean you enjoy the terrible stuff, but it does mean you have compassion for others because you recognize that what motivates individuals to be nasty to others is that they are unwanted themselves. Some may argue that this does not apply to narcissists, but my father is narcissistic, and I genuinely feel it is an overcompensation for a long-held fear of inadequacy. At the age of 16, I never informed anybody about what had occurred to me and never went to a doctor to get checked out because I was afraid that if I told anyone about my experience, they would think I was insane. I'm still hesitant to share about it because I recognize that not only do many people dismiss near-death experiences, but mine includes some curiously distinct components that would make me seem more weirder. Many individuals in my life are interested in science and regard NDEs as chemical processes in a dying brain. What I experienced, on the other hand, was more real than what we consider to be reality. It also had a significant impact on my life. The most significant aspect of the after effects was not how my body felt or whether or not I gained talents, but how different I became as a person.